So today I'm talking to Brad Tucker. Brad Tucker is a creative director, a live action director, designer, and an AI artist. So I first came across Brad's work about a year ago on LinkedIn. And I think I saw a piece, the first piece I saw that stood out to me was kind of these gemstones that you created, and they were kind of molding and blending into um, other kind of gems. So it's kind of difficult to describe your style in words. Um, but it really stood out at the time because at the time a lot of people were doing these warp diffusion videos that are kind of the endlessly zooming camera that zoomed in, and it was a bit like a fever dream, and the temporal consistency was, it was all over the place, really. And
A lot to be desired. Yeah.
yeah, and even a year ago, like the work that I saw you creating was like super consistent. So maybe we can start by you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the AI kind of world.
Sure. Yeah. So I just kind of fell into AI. It wasn't something that I was looking for by any means. I had kind of, guess we'll take a step back to like early 2001. The pandemic was still kind of going. We were all working from home. I needed something to do. I was trying to teach myself Octane and Cinema 4D. I hadn't really played in 3D apps and in any real capacity in probably like 20 years. And everybody I know was using hardware rendering. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I want to learn how to do that. So I started playing there. I was selling these things as NFTs, just little monochrome loops, basically, was all they were. And I did a lot of little ball and kind of cube animations, just something to like practice lighting and using HDRIs, all the things that you need to know in 3D. And somehow, while I was on Twitter, somebody had posted something that was done in AI, and I can't remember who the first person was that I saw. So this is probably like March 2021. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And it was, a technique called VQGAN. OpenAI had just released their DALL-E software. And when I say released, they didn't really release it. They just kind of, teased everybody with a, chair made of avocados, I think is how it went. And everybody was like blown away by this. And this programmer, River Have Wings, she developed this notebook called the VQGAN, and it used a clip from OpenAI to kind of create images. And that was my first kind of like foray into the AI world. I started playing with this notebook, and those that don't know what a notebook is, it's kind of like running a terminal session on your Mac or on your PC, except you're running it in a cloud environment. So you're kind of controlling a Linux computer based on these little cells that are on a website. So it looked kind of familiar to me. I had a little bit of a background working with IT back in the early 90s. So I still remembered my shell commands, and I was like, oh, this just looks like a shell script of some sort. So I started pressing through the buttons, and I got to this thing where it told me to describe what was in there, what I wanted it to create. And, I came up with a pretty generic prompt, probably something to do with cats and pizza, and hit the button, and what came out of it was kind of a freak show, but it was also really, really cool. And I thought, wow, this is something really interesting to me. So I just kept playing with it. And, before a month went by, I had figured out how to animate with it, which was basically just taking your original VQGAN image from, one frame before, and it would use it as an initial image in the next frame. And it would create something that was a little bit different. And it was usually just by like scaling it a little bit, which is what you were kind of talking about, except you're a little bit later on it. The stuff that you were looking at was using diffusion. This was using a GAN. So kind of two different technologies there. And I started making animations, and Twitter really grabbed to them very quickly. They're like, what is this? And I just kept doing them for, I don't know, probably about 2 months. I did one every day. That's all I would care about was working on this one zoom in animation. And then I started throwing turns into the camera, and, just starting to get camera control. But keyframing was really weird. You and I are used to like a timeline, right? There's no timeline here. It's like basically working on an Excel spreadsheet. You see all of your every frame, and then you tell it how much you want it to change each frame and in which direction. You have X, Y, Z, and then we got really crazy. Or sorry, you had X and Y, and you kind of had Z for zooming, but then they started getting a little bit crazier, and they started adding like Midas depth warp into it, and so you started getting parallax, and you could start to control the tilt of the camera and everything, but it's still not an easy procedure. You have no timeline yet. It's all kind of writing just keyframes, it's just kind of strange. So that was kind of my initial, introduction into AI. It was really cool. I had a lot of fun. The technology at the time did not make anything that was as nice as what we get today. It wasn't fast by any means. It was about 7 minutes per frame. We're down to, on my machine, I get them out in two seconds a frame now. So, big difference in timing. But it was really, really mind-blowing what you could get out of it. I still want to go back and use VQGAN sometimes. It's hard to actually get it to work on any computer. There was a guy who was making a notebook still for it as of last year, but I think he's kind of given up on it now. And unfortunately, his notebook doesn't work in Colab. And but there's something very unique about that look. And from there, I started getting into this group of people on AI that was all on Twitter, and we were also on Discord. And there was a really great notebook called Pity. It's PYTII, I think. It might be 2 T's and 1 I. But that was kind of like, it used VQGAN. It had all the animation stuff kind of built into one. And everybody that I know who was working in AI was on this Discord channel or Discord server. So I met a ton of people in these early days just on that one Discord server. And literally all those people have gone on to very big things, and we all still kind of talk and know each other. And it was kind of like a special point in time. I don't know if we'll get back to that at any point, but I met all the people that I knew from Stable Diffusion over there. They were posting. Ahmad, the owner of Stable, was actually posting things that his kids were making in there, and we didn't know what he was up to. Later to find out what he was doing. So it was a really cool Discord channel, and a lot of knowledge was kind of being thrown around. Very experimental at the time, because nothing looked like what you really wanted, and it was a really special place. I want to go back and see what's going on there. The guy who organized it, I don't know what's been happening with him. He's kind of been silent for the last year or so. Every once in a while, he gets sent to another Discord channel and he joins and then disappears again, and we never hear from him. Mysterious, very mysterious. But yeah, that was my intro. I think I answered you.
I know, that's really cool. Yeah, because I think for me and for a lot of people, kind of AI exploded on the scene kind of a year ago. Like a year's kind of when ChatGPT kind of became more usable.
That's right around the time that Midjourney really started to explode as well. I remember this time period about a year ago, and I remember walking into my LinkedIn feed and I'm like, I'm not going back in there for a while. Like, that's all anybody was talking about was Midjourney. And it was funny to me. It's like, man, there's a million other things out there other than Midjourney. And while that's very accessible and easy for everybody to use, and it has great results, you really can explore a lot more to AI than just Midjourney. I almost feel like I'm cheating when I'm in Midjourney sometimes because it's so easy. Like I can type in 3 words and I still get amazingness from it. Whereas, I might have to work a little bit harder in Stable Diffusion to get something that I want. But at the end of the day, I got a lot more control. And I kind of like the idea of it being more open. That's one of those things that was always very cool to me in the AI field, was that people were willing to share their knowledge. A lot of us are pretty private with our prompts, but past that, I'll tell you how I do what I do. I have no problem doing that. But, it was always a very open community, and I really liked that. So that was one of the things that made me excited about Stable Diffusion, was that it was open. They seemed to have good intentions with getting that stuff out to everybody, teaching how to train. I've always been into training models. Ever since I started, I was like, wow, that was going to be the golden ticket for me, was how do I train my own model? How do I use a model? And so I've done a lot of that, and it's time consuming. That first piece that you were talking about that you saw of mine actually was using a technology called StyleGAN. And, that's training a GAN, and it takes a long time. I usually feed it 5 to 10,000 images in a data set. And then we wait for, at least a week, sometimes two, before the model's trained. And that GPU is being used 24/7. It's, the fan's blowing over here. It's 100 degrees in the house. Sometimes I fire it off to a cloud server just because I don't want to deal with the heat or the noise.
Cool. So when you do train your own models, are you using kind of AI generated imagery to train that, or is that kind of found imagery?
When I first started, I was scraping the internet just like anybody else would. I would go find a bunch of crystals. Nothing crazy about them. I mean, the better the quality of them, in terms of how they were photographed, the better. But you were somewhat limited. And just coming up with 1,000 to 2,000 images at that point was very daunting to me. You had places that you'd think would be easy, like go to Instagram, right? There's got to be somebody who just takes 1 million pictures of crystals there. But it wasn't easy to download them all from Instagram. They started putting blocks in place, and it just became difficult to do it that way. Plus, you always wanted to have at least something that was 1024 by 1024, because StyleGAN liked square 1024 images. 512 worked pretty good as well, but it's like that big. With 1024, it's like double the res, and then from there you could even go up to 2K with it with an upscaler. But so I was finding images at first, and then I started to take those images. I think the piece you're talking about was actually, I took initial crystal images and used those as initial images, but then I used JAX diffusion over the top of them, and that was something that was kind of put out by Google loosely, the JAX workflow. And I really liked JAX because you never really knew what you were going to get out of it, but it was always really, really detailed. And I met the developer of the notebook for that, and he'd always kind of ask me, what is it that you're looking for still? How do you want to do this? And he was always implementing things that I asked for, which I thought was really cool. And one of the big things for me was, hey, I need to feed JAX 2,000 images and just let it run all night long. And I want to run the same prompt on top of all of those images. And so he wrote that into the software for me. And so that was kind of how that project came to life. I was able to run them all through JAX. Then I had what I felt was a very kind of custom data set, something that hadn't been seen before. It was all JAXified, it kind of had that JAX look to it to me. And then I took those and I trained those. Trying to remember, I believe I did that in StyleGAN 3, which was also it was a tough beast to tame. StyleGAN 2 always looks good. StyleGAN 3 was always very, very difficult to get to work. But that one looked really amazing. And later to come find out, if you kind of have things centered in the frame, you don't have things going off to the edge, you're almost aligning all the objects that way, which really helps StyleGAN create a more beautiful interpolation, I think. But I didn't know that at the time, and I had to fail, another 200 times after that to realize that's why that one worked so well, whereas the other ones didn't.
I can remember seeing another series of videos you did, and I don't know what tools you used for that, but there was there's one that's kind of like it's lots of different sea animals or inspired by sea animals, and it's kind of in a globe, kind of rotating. Was that with StyleGAN 3 or?
So are you actually you said it was a rotating globe as well?
Yeah, it's kind of a sphere. Maybe I can just share it and then you can.
Yeah, maybe, because I did some stuff that was actually tied to 3D where I used a globe as like a background plate and then tracked all of the 3D objects onto it. That was using some technology called warp fusion. Yeah, that's exactly what that is. So this was my very first test of warp fusion. And so this was kind of a two-parter. I used those skills that I was talking about in 3D on here. And I basically made a sphere that had a displacement map on it. So it was kind of like a lumpy sphere. And then I ended up prompting over the top of that and using that motion as what the 3D was to track to. So this was kind of the holy grail for me at that time. This was like, wow, I can probably drive the motion of 3D, the motion of the AI with the 3D. And you couldn't pull this off before this, and there was Alex DevDef is his Twitter name, started doing this thing with Warp Fusion is what he called it. And a really complex notebook. It took me 2 weeks to get that result. And even then, as you get further into my process, you can see how much better I was able to resolve that. But I always really liked that look. I thought it was kind of a cool, interesting look. I started to interpolate in between frames, so it's a lot smaller, smoother, and the fidelity of the image quality started to get a lot better as I played with that over the next probably 6 months or so.
Yeah, putting 2 weeks into kind of one piece of work, that's a level of dedication that I don't think a lot of people have.
No, I don't think a lot of people understand what goes into a lot of the initial testing on this. I think people use Midjourney and they immediately believe that's how all AI works. It really doesn't. If you're just trying to get images out, yeah, you can definitely do things like that. But if you're trying to push the envelope a little bit, it starts to become difficult. And if you open up like that Warp Fusion notebook, there are literally, I'm guessing there's probably 200 variables that can change. And every one of those variables has a very large impact, and it's not documented. So you don't always know what it's going to do, or it's documented in a way that doesn't really make sense. You talk to the developer about it. They explain what they think it's doing and how it works. You go back and use it, you're like, well, it doesn't really work that way. Or what I also find a lot of times is you and I speak a certain language with motion design, and we think one thing means something, but to a developer, it means something completely different. So I've run into that a lot as well. Like the idea of gamma, right? Like we work on 2.2 gamma monitors, or 1.8 if you're on a Mac, an old Mac. But if you talk about gamma in that respect to a developer or somebody who's doing like StyleGAN, it means something completely different to them. And it's just kind of like, oh geez, okay, there's a big vocabulary difference here.
Yeah. One thing that is really interesting to do, like I know you don't share a lot of work to LinkedIn, which is kind of cool because it means that like you can scroll through and like you can see your work from a year ago. You can see it kind of like how it progresses.
So those were all Warp Fusion. That actually is pre-Stable Diffusion before it was even called Stable Diffusion. Yeah, and I don't post a whole lot of work on LinkedIn. And part of the reason was at a certain point it seemed like there was just a lot of hate for AI on LinkedIn, and I was like, I just don't want to have any part of this. I'm doing this for fun, and so yeah, at that point I stopped posting to LinkedIn.
I think that was kind of a period like when it was kind of new, and a lot of artists had this fear about kind of taking their style.
Sure.
And not that that's what your work really does, but the Midjourney thing, for example, it's easy to kind of take someone's style and replicate it and use their their name within a prompt.
Sure.
So that might be interesting to chat about for a little bit.
Absolutely.
Where do you fall on that kind of spectrum of kind of AI and copyright?
I think it's tough. I think there's a lot to be had still, and I don't think we know exactly where everything's going to lie and where it's going to shake out. I was part of just literally yesterday, an open letter got sent to the Copyright Office from a group of artists that I was part of. And, I feel like someone needs to look at what we're doing as a process and be able to figure out how some of it can be copyrighted. When I string 10 different AIs together and I'm creating something that's pretty novel and somewhat unique, I should be able to copyright that. With that said, like style shouldn't be copyrightable anyhow, and it's not. We all know how in the motion world, we're always asked to emulate something. I kind of want it to look like this. Maybe it's a cross between that and this. I want this black and white look. Imagine if Frank Miller owned the copyright to like a comic book look. It would be extremely difficult to kind of create anything black and white ever again. So I feel like style really shouldn't matter so much. Same thing within design. It's like style should be part of the idea. It should be giving you some sort of, it should be giving meaning. Without that, it's just kind of style. It's blah. I don't really care. So I think every artist has to come to their own unique way of using the tools, and they have to come and figure out how to use it. I remember when I first started using it, I'm like, I don't know if this is right or not, but I got away from that. I stopped using artist names as much as possible. A lot of artists are not using artist names in their work just because they don't want to piss the artist off if something ends up looking like that. It's kind of a respect issue. But I feel like, everybody needs to kind of come to it, and they got to be able to sleep at night, and I think ultimately people will start to just figure out how to use the tools in a way that they feel is comfortable for them. But I don't know how it's all going to play out. It's really, I see it from all points of view because I am an artist. I also want to keep working, right? But that's part of the reason why I wanted to learn all this too, is I could see this is probably the future, and you can really go in a lot of unusual places with it.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. So you're in the US. I mean, if we move to kind of some of your more recent work, so if I understand rightly, the copyright law in the US, like I don't remember the exact wording, but there's something that says that it has to have human intent to it.
Yes.
So at the moment in the US, the argument is that if you hit run on an AI,
yep,
that's not enough human, I'm not sure the word I'm struggling to find, but it's not enough input from the human.
That's what it seems to be at the current point. Whether it's going to still be that way, a year from now or 2 years from now, I don't know. In fact, the Copyright Office is right now asking for conversation on this. You can go in and send your thoughts to the Copyright Office. They have a link online for it. But yeah, that's kind of it. So let's say you made something in Midjourney. If you don't bring it into Photoshop and do something with it, draw over the top of it, collage with it, you would not be able to secure a copyright in the US currently.
Yeah. So if we bring that back to your kind of one of your most recent pieces that I've seen is, maybe you can talk a little bit about this.
Yep.
And I did look on your website, and I don't know if this is something. Are you working with NFT now?
I've always been doing NFTs. I've been doing them since 2001.
Is this an NFT or is this just?
It's not. I never minted that one. I don't know why. I think it would probably sell. It's really cool, but I mean the NFT market right now is really poopy. Anyhow, it's not very big.
I was wondering if that was one kind of the avenue you were following to obviously there's a lot of work and you've explained that goes into this AI and connecting different AI models and fine tuning and everything.
Yep.
And to do this work and then not be able to copyright it, I was wondering if NFTs were kind of the avenue that you were using to solve that problem at the moment.
I mean, it gives me some sort of ownability on it, but the whole JPEG thing of being able to right click, save, and sell NFTs is a big controversial topic as well. I mean, all it really does is, it puts a date on when I made something. It's secured on the blockchain that way. People know that I had my hand on making it. Whether we can copyright this work or not will be determined here in the future. This is a pretty long process to pull this thing off. So I made 10,000 images, and I did use Midjourney, and I also used Stable Diffusion. I created a model on Stable Diffusion to be able to create things that were similar to this. And so I took the two kind of image generators, put them together. From there, I ended up taking all those images and training another model within StyleGAN on those images. And StyleGAN is what allows you to get these kind of really great interpolations. So StyleGAN's a very kind of specialized model generator, if you will. You can't just type into it make a boy and a cat, right? There's no clip in it, so there's no text portion to it where you're going to say that, and then it's going to create something. All that model does is create those shapes. That's all it does. That's what it learned how to do, and that's what it knows how to do. So I can make those now. I can make motion and little movies like that unique ones, I can make millions of them, because I have that model now that can create those. But, creating that model, it took 2 weeks, from start to finish. I had to create all the images first, had to train the model. Then you have to go through and you have to export seeds is what it's called. So it basically shows you all these different stills. Then you go through, you curate those, and you figure out, okay, I like this one, I like that one, I like this one. And then you tell it to go between this one and this one and this one and this one. And that's what you get as a video at the end of it all. There are some new tools out there now where you can put little like control points on your objects and you can make things move. Like let's say you had a mouth, you could make it move, or you can make somebody's eyes big. There's a lot more you can do with it now, but StyleGAN was an older technology. I think that probably came out, the initial one probably in the early 2000s. And then, where I'm StyleGAN 3 now, I don't think you'll ever see another one. I think people are trying to figure out 3D objects and things like that at this point. I don't think there's much interest in StyleGAN other than, by like artists. I feel like a lot of artists are still using it. It was initially trained just to make fake faces, and you can go check out the StyleGAN repo. There's great examples there of all the fake heads that were made with it.
Cool. Like you're a commercial artist, you're a designer, you're a director. Where does this AI fit into your commercial work? Is it separate or are they connected?
I've kept it completely separate so far. I've been asked by numerous of the agencies and studios that I work for to, let's just do a quick music video or do this. And I just kind of stay away from it. I've looked at this as more like a hobby, something for fun for me to do. But I feel like everywhere I go, people are asking me about it now. I think it's going to start merging at some point here. Lately I've been giving courses on AI, and that's kind of how I've just been making money, because the agency that I was working for a couple of months ago is not financially stable. So they can't afford to keep me on the payroll. So instead of going back to agency life, I've been like, okay, I'll start taking and giving some classes. There's a lot of people who want to know how to work StyleGAN, but if you've ever gone to the GitHub and read it, it's complex and it's foreign. So, in 3 or 4 hours, I can teach somebody how to start getting some results with it. They've got to go back and experiment for a couple of weeks on their own and then maybe ask me some more questions. But, that's been fun for me to kind of teach people, see who actually can take the lesson and run with it and make something, and see who is like, nah, dude, this is way too much work.
Yeah, I think it's certainly definitely, I guess there's a personality type that would lean into this more.
Yeah, you absolutely. I feel like I see a lot of people tell me they want to learn it, and then as soon as I kind of go through the process of what it is, it's just like, no way. I'm not even going to go there. I thought this was like mid-journey. I thought we were just going to type a couple words and be done with it. And it's like, no, you actually have to work and try a little bit, and you're going to fail probably 10 times for every one that you get that's good. So
cool. So if someone was interested in learning this, how would they kind of reach out to you?
They can just hit me up on LinkedIn. It's probably the best bet, since I've started posting again. I mean, all those posts over the last month have gone pretty crazy for me, at least, in terms of LinkedIn posts. I never really had any traffic on LinkedIn, and I was shocked by the amount of it. Like that wavy one that you showed, I mean, it got like 2,000 clicks and a couple 100,000 views on it. It was like, wow, I had no idea. So, but that's how I've been, taking business so far, is just reach out to me on LinkedIn. We set up a little call. We talk a little bit, find out actually what it is you want to learn, because I feel like everybody's a little different. The classes that I give are not, like a 30-person class. It's literally a one-on-one. It's like me and you sitting down and we discuss what you want to learn. And there's so many things out there. I mean, the sky's the limit. I could be teaching a different class every single day, every week, for the next, year, and probably not cover the same topic twice.
And I'm just looking at like one of the recent ones, like it was experimenting with kind of animation diffusing.
Yes, Animate Diff. Yeah.
Animate Diff. Yeah, that's one. And is that using ControlNet as well?
Yeah, that's using ControlNet. It's also using masking techniques. So, the ControlNet portion of this, if you are familiar with ControlNet, is kind of driven off of black and white images. So it's concentric circles, I'm going outwards. So like a black circle goes, and then there's a white circle that goes, and so I've got a little looping animation of that happening. And the beauty of this workflow was that I was able to tell it, hey, in the black areas, put this, in the white areas, put that. Usually with ControlNet, all it does is kind of use the same prompt and it puts it there. And you will see differences where those two things are. And I don't know if I posted examples of that. Probably not, because it wasn't as cool as this. But once I started stringing in the masks to it as well, I was like, man, this is really cool. And then of course I cheated. I used water. Like water always looks amazing in Anime Diff, and I ended up getting something that was just really, really cool out of it. Yeah, I was pretty happy with that piece.
Animate Diff appeared on my kind of radar like a couple of weeks ago. Has it been around for longer than that? Or
yeah, it's been around at least maybe 6 to 8 months now. It was all command line at first, so you had to just like go in and do some command line work. Recently, there was a person who put it into Comfy UI, which is really what gave it its big wings, because now all of a sudden you can do a lot more with it. You control a lot more with it. There's kind of two big pieces of software for stable diffusion that people use. Actually, probably three. There's Automatic 1111, which is a web-based Gradio GUI. Kind of no frills in terms of looks, but it did at least give you a web GUI, and it has a ton of extensions and plugins, and you can put Anime Diff into that. There was one called Invoke, which is what I would consider like the Mac version of Automatic 1111, a very pretty UI. Not as fully featured in terms of extensions and plugins that you can throw into it. And then there's Comfy UI, which is, I don't know, it's a node-based system. It's like working in Flame or Houdini or any of those things that use nodes. And you control the AI through nodes. And as soon as I started using that, I'm like, oh my God, everything is different for me now. I love it.
Yeah, there's some pretty complex like node-based maps flying around the internet at the moment.
Yeah. So and I feel like some people just try to make them as hard as they can. I go in and I grab a lot of those and I delete half the shit they put in it, because they've installed literally every plugin known to man into it and they're trying to utilize all of them. And it's like, I don't know. I always like when I've learned how to do something the hard way first, so that I can appreciate the easy way, if there is an easy way. So yeah, that has been a really good way for me to learn as well, Comfy, because it's fairly complex. But if you go in, you open up somebody's workflow, you dissect it to the point where you're like, I can make this work with all the generic plugins or generic node system. I don't know. I think you learn a lot more that way. Then you can go back and use all the cool things that they put into it. But yeah, Comfy is really awesome. It's kind of intimidating for a lot of people at first, and I think they start to see the why it's so cool. Like I can start, for instance, with SDXL. I can run an image through it, but then I can also take that image once it comes out of SDXL and I can run it back through like a photorealism model from Stable Diffusion 1.5 and have it use that XL image as an initial image and kind of go over the top of it. So if I'm doing portraits of people and I'm really trying to make them look realistic, that's usually what I'll do is I'll send it through SDXL. I'll send it through the SDXL refiner. Then I'll pump all of that up into like an old model that I know has like really great skin detail, or will change the eyes, because every time I see somebody's eyes and their eyebrows and SDXL, I can tell exactly where it came from. So, with being able to kind of stitch all these different tools together within Comfy, you start to get some really unique looks, and you're able to put workflows together that you can't put in, or can't even make on Automatic 1111 or an Invoke. Although Invoke just got a node system, so you might be able to do some of the same stuff now. But I feel like Comfy is getting a lot of people making things for it, like Anime Diff. The guy he took the original Anime Diff code and changed it. He called it Anime Diff Evolved, and now it's part of the node system. So I've got ways to bring in video now. I've got ways to create video now within Comfy. And I think it's just going to keep going that route. There's all these different video makers now that you can start to do things with. There's like Zero Scope. I wouldn't be surprised to see that in here. The guy who created Warp Fusion, he actually has his own version of Comfy UI now. And that's kind of the beauty of open source. Everybody can kind of take this code and build upon it and say, hey, I could use that, but maybe I'll do it this way. And so you just make your own version. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's ever evolving, seems like, from week to week.
Yeah.
This one's a bit more broad and general, so some people are a little bit scared about the future of design and AI with all these tools coming out and automations that may or may not happen. So what are your thoughts on that? Is AI good or bad for the design industry?
I think ultimately it's going to be a good thing. I think people need to figure out how to work with it. But I think ultimately, you're never going to be able to replace the human altogether. There's too much thought process and there's too many things that happen. I mean, just look at the English language, right? You can interpret it in so many different ways. And AI is kind of the same thing. You might tell it you want a red ball and it might give you one, but it might not mean the right thing. So someone's got to be there to kind of interpret what's being there. I think what it does start to do is it starts to turn us all into a little bit more of a curation type of person than necessarily a maker. But with that said, someone's going to have to learn to control the tools too and make things. It doesn't just come out all from text all the time. So somebody has to figure out how to string these tools together, how to actually create the work. And that can be a lot of work. You've got a lot of programmers and whatnot that are working together to try to create a lot of these tool sets. And a lot of times you're just being fed either code or APIs and somebody has to figure it out. I look at the rotoscope community, they've really started to dig in and figure out how to use these tools for their advantage. And rotoscoping, for those that don't know, sucks, right? It's going through frame by frame on a piece of video footage and cutting somebody out. And, we all look at green screen and think, oh, okay, green screen. Yeah, just one click it. It doesn't really work that way. A lot of times somebody has to go through and cut this out frame by frame to get a good key or a good mask on it. And I see a lot of the groups out there putting tools together and starting to create workflows that they can use in their rotoscoping to save them time and effort. And it still work. They still have to go in and finesse the details on it, but it is starting to become a little bit more one click for them. And personally, as a rotoscoper, I would think, wow, that's got to be awesome. I don't know how people roto, but some of them love it.
Yeah, that's definitely. Well, I'd put that in a chore. More in a chore than a pleasure.
I'm happy to send it off to somebody else to do. That was kind of another one of the first tools that I think I used with AI was a company called Runway ML. I'm probably familiar with their latest thing, Gen 2. But before all of that, they had this tool. They had an online editorial tool. And within that editorial tool was an instant rotoscoper. So you could just pick a person and you literally just magic wand the person and it would cut you out perfectly. And then you would hit play and you'd watch it go. And then, as soon as your mask slipped, you'd go in and correct it a little bit and it would go again. And it was wow, so much time savings was there through that rotoscope tool. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, but now they're on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, I think they recently yesterday or the day before, did an update to their video model.
No, they did. And, they support artists as well, which is great. I don't know if you've noticed, they had a 48-hour film competition, which was really cool. That went on last week. They have something called the CPP, which is the Creative Partners Program, which I'm actually part of. And, they've given me free credits. I can just use all the tools now as much as I want, which is awesome because it's a little bit costly. But, they're trying to promote themselves, but also give artists a chance to actually go in and beat this stuff up. They've been good about listening to feedback, this doesn't work the way I like it to. And pretty much every week or two, we're seeing a pretty major update to Gen 2 recently, which has been really cool to see. When I started using that, I knew a director and he kind of helped me get in. He had some friends over there. And I started playing with Gen 1, which was cool. You fed it video and it kind of drew over the top of it. You could stylize videos, really cool. And that was kind of the first step. And then they moved into this whole, you could just type in words and all of a sudden it would make it. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But what really made them stand out was when all of a sudden I could just take an image that I created and put it in and say, make this move. And that was like magic. I don't think any of us saw AI video going that direction. I think we all thought it was going to be prompt based or you're going to feed it a video, but I never expected to be able to actually just give it the image and have it understand what that image was and make it like move all of a sudden. So that was kind of like one of those, oh, and that's one of those questions that people always ask, like, where do you think AI is going to go? It's like, man, I have no idea. I thought it was going to go this route, but somebody figured out a way to do something different. And I think that's one of the really beautiful things about AI, and people thinking a little bit differently about it. I'm like, I don't understand why they don't talk to current After Effects artists and current, flame artists and try to figure out how they work. And it's kind of because they're figuring out kind of these new workflows that we haven't even thought about yet. I don't know. That's probably your next question, huh?
Well, no, it is amazing. Yeah, it's like I liken it to kind of the era of the internet. Like I was alive before the internet and after the internet.
Yeah, right.
Like when the internet first came out and it was just a static web page, and you were like, there's no way you could have predicted social media, like food deliveries, like Uber, like all these things that have fundamentally changed the way that we live and work. There was just no way to predict that. So it's very exciting to be like here in the AI and working with it. But again, like who knows where this is going?
Yeah, it's really tough. And I've been doing this for 3 years, which seems like an eternity. But literally, and I'm not lying, it's daily there's a new paper that comes out from a new group of scientists that have figured out how to do something else with AI that you weren't even considering or thinking about. And, you'll go, I can't always read the papers because they're maybe a little too complex for my little brain, but I can see the examples of what they've been able to do. And every time I'm just in awe. I remember the first time I saw that you could just put a still in and it broke it up into a depth map, basically. And all of a sudden you can move that still around, and now we have that technology in our cell phone for the most part. But, when I first saw it, I was like, this is incredible. I never thought of doing that.
Yeah. I guess that's the next thing that I'm looking forward to is kind of layered videos. I imagine we've already got the technology to segment the objects and recognize what they are.
Yeah.
When the processing power catches up to, you can just generate a layered video with kind of depth in, and you could manipulate.
I think it's kind of already there, man. I've seen implementations of Nerf that happen on video. They're not just single frames anymore. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, except I think it's not layered, it's 3-dimensional. So it's kind of taking your idea there and even blowing it out to the next level. It's a point cloud of radness.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for your time. I just got one fun little question. So if you had to predict like when general artificial intelligence was to arrive, where would you put that on the scale of like the next few years to the next 50 or never?
I don't know. I really have no idea. I mean, we've been talking about AI since I was a kid. Not to completely date myself, but it's been a long while. I don't think it's necessarily there. I think we're kind of just tipping the tip of the iceberg myself. We're making pictures. We've got chatbots. It's learning from what we've done, but I think putting it all together into one pretty package that would be considered AGI, I don't know. I think we've got some time. I think we've got at least 10 years. That's probably still less time than a lot of people are anticipating, but that seems to make the most sense to me. I think we're going to definitely see major impacts of it here in the next, year to 5 years. Everywhere I look, I'm starting to see it now. I'm seeing it in Figma. I see it on all the Adobe apps. I'm seeing it, if you're looking to put a resume together, there's AI to do that for you. There's AI to read the resumes for you. There's literally, it's the catchword of the year right now. It's got AI that does this. It's AI that does that. It's everywhere. And even if you didn't realize you were using AI, I think with iPhone, by 2016, 2017, if you go back to that keynote, all they talked about was the neural engine. That's AI. It was just another way to call it something else. I think Apple's been scared of the term AI literally since then, when they started using it and they started to figure out, let's call it something else so that we don't scare people. And you'll notice they're still not really talking about it now. They're just starting to break out and say, yeah, we're doing stuff with it. Don't worry, guys. But I think it's mostly just to appease people because they're like, why aren't you using AI? and they have been for 5 years.
Yeah, Apple's definitely. As I'm waiting to see what they do. Obviously, they are integrating, like you say, just within everything.
I mean, at the very least, they're going to put it into Siri. You're going to have some sort of assistant. Whether they're going to do AI image generation, I don't know why they would really do that. But I think like what they've done with their camera, there's been a lot of features with AI built into that. You've got the two-lens system, which immediately gives you depth. You got a LiDAR scanner. I mean, everything is set up there for them to be able to make, nerfs or Gaussian splattering, whatever you want to call it. Like it's there. I think that's going to come. You're going to be able to take videos. You're going to be able to take 3D scans. Like it's very close.
Awesome. Nice one. Thanks. It's been great chatting to you.
Yeah. Likewise, Luke. Good to meet you, man.
If you like this video, you love our weekly newsletter, sign up at designresources.ai.